Good afternoon. I continue to be Sergeant First Class Joshua Everett, and today I'm going to talk to you about the importance of knowing and appreciating the history of the early United States of America. Our second president, John Adams, who you see there at the bottom, he once said, and I quote, "Posterity, you will never know how much it costs the present generation to preserve your freedom. I hope you will make good use of it," unquote. And what the president meant back then, during the 18th century, was the present generation who had fought for us in the Revolution. He wanted to make sure that future generations like us would continue to make good use of the war that they fought and the freedoms that they won for us. We'll talk about today, we'll talk about how over the history of our country only a very small percentage of us have ever fought for it. We'll talk about at one point during the Revolution a very small amount of men conquered a large amount of territory, which set us up for the superpower and the securities we have today. And we'll also talk about some of the mistakes that were made over the history of our nation that started way back then, 240 years ago, that we have learned from. I got most of my information today from some historical works by Alan W. Eckert, a great historical writer, the writings of George Rogers Clark, who was a young soldier and leader back then in the Revolution, and also two websites I can get you to when my presentation is over. So according to National Public Radio, NPR, less than 1% of our current population serves in the armed forces. Only 2 million, about 2 million people are in the armed forces, and out of 309 million. This is mirrored by the fact that in the Revolution, it was basically the same way. 240 years ago, only about 1% of the population actually fought for our freedoms against the British. Over the history of the United States, only about 10% of our entire population, over 250 years almost, ever picked up a weapon and fought. How is that important to you and me? Well, because we are service members ourselves, or we're service members, and it goes to show that a determined minority can get a lot done, to include the freedoms of our country that we enjoy today. At one point, I'll skip ahead here real quick, at one point in the Revolution in 1778 and 1779, George Rogers Clark was a young planter from Virginia. He was moving to Kentucky, and there was a lot of fighting the British in Kentucky, so he took only 250 men who volunteered, just like me and you, and was able to go to Illinois, defeat the British there, and almost double the size of the 13 colonies with the old Northwest Territories, which is now 5 states. He did that with only 250 men, took him a little over 6 months. And that shows to you, again, what a small determined minority can do, volunteers just like me or you. If that doesn't give us a good example to follow to this very day, I don't know what does. What that also began, unfortunately, was what is known as, you've probably heard of Manifest Destiny. Manifest Destiny, why we conquered the North American continent basically from sea to shining sea. These pictures you see here, of course, are hard to look at. On the left, you see Native Americans dying from smallpox, which is a disease we brought from Europe. On the right, of course, you see the scars of a slave taken in the 1850s. Mistakes were made. These facts are undeniable. And they are also, sadly, a part of the history of the United States. If there's any good that can come from those facts, it's the fact that today we strive for equality. We continue to strive for equality. We have the security given to us by those men and women so long ago, that small percentage of men and women so long ago, that we continue to defend and strive for. Martin Luther King himself, and the equalities that we continue to strive for to this very day. Embodied in our own Declaration of Independence that you see right there, all men are created equal. So we talked about today the small percentage of soldiers, or a small percentage of our population who have ever fought for our country and what they were able to do. We talked about Manifest Destiny and our conquering of the entire continent, which had both good and bad points. And we talked about how that ended up and how we can learn from those things. As our national motto, E pluribus unum, that's Latin for from many, one, which is what we are today. I will leave you with a quote from possibly the greatest soldier and the greatest leader in the history of the United States ever, General George Washington himself, our first president and also our leader in the Revolution. And he said, and I quote, "We should not look back unless it is to derive useful lessons from past errors and for the purpose of profiting from dearly bought experience," unquote. And basically what that sums that up is we have to learn from our past so we can get better in the future. And if we can do so, we will honor people that came before us. Thank you very much.